Hello everyone, welcome. This session follows directly on from the using performance data to identify areas of improvement, and then with today's session looking at ratio proportion rates of change. So if you've not seen that session, we'll do a very quick recap of how to look into Results Plus, but please do find that recording on the PD Academy to watch that. You don't need to have seen that one to work through today, but it will help, and it will hopefully refresh the processes of what we're going to be touching on today as well. I'm just going to move that there. There we go. Right. Hopefully, after this session, there'll be a golden nugget or two, or a conversation that can carry on. This is a little bit different to any session myself and Mel has ever run before. It's a deep dive. We're looking at a particular area of maths. It's not going to be the complete hour at all. We want more time at the end if there is need for questions and a discussion. But we also want this to be with you guys almost like a bit of a working party. We want your ideas as much as what we've got. We're just two maths teachers that are going to be talking about how we teach ratio, proportion, rates of change, particularly ratio and proportion. And then we want to delve into how you guys look at it. Is there anything that we can learn as well to take away? And as we finish this session, we're going to be looking at how and what, more particularly, we look at with you guys next time. So we've got a bit of a period of time, and I think the date for that one is, if I'm looking up at my planner here, I'm pretty sure we're into March the 4th for that one. It may not be rubber stamps, but it's around that period of time. So we've got a bit of a period of time to think about what we have as a group of us, to talk about next time. And if there's anyone willing to be part and parcel in terms of sharing ideas ongoing between now and March via email between myself and Mal, please, 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 it'll be brilliant to have it not just two teachers' ideas, but a few more of us. Who are we? Myself and Mal worked together for many, many years. We don't currently work together at the moment. We're in different schools at the moment, but we've worked together, moved apart, moved back together. It's almost like we can't keep away from each other. That sounds wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We just ended up working together for so long. We know each other inside out in terms of how we teach. So as much as I'm saying this is two teachers talking about how we teach, it's two teachers that have worked together for a long time, that have honed certain processes, certain ideas, certain buzzwords that have cropped up over the years and made our own version of events that seems to have rippled across quite a few topics now, hasn't it, in terms of how does that idea work here? How does that consistency flow into other areas of maths? And we were talking just before coming online today how the foundation tier particularly, and we're going to see it a bit more when I talk about a bit of a case study of my school, opens it up a little bit more naturally than maybe the higher tier does. And again, that we're going to have that conversation as we work through. But over the years, we've worked in the most improved school in England twice. PES maths.
Yeah, would you like to, sorry, evening all. I'm Mel in the background while he's chatting on. I'm gonna at this point, would you like to tell us how your school did this last summer, Mr. Seager?
Yes, so can I rewind to what year was it? 2014, 2012? Whenever it was. We got the most improved school in England, and I remember the head teacher finding out from the Times ringing up saying, do you know you're the most improved school in England? That then started this role actually with Pearson, the credible specialists that we are. So we work in schools. I'm head of department, Mal's a lead prac, and one day a week we're working with Pearson. Mine's Wednesday, Mal's is a Thursday. So anything or any conversation you want to develop, you want to come to our school to see us, which we do. We love to host schools, or you want us to come to you, or you want to talk on Zoom or over the phone. That's our role with Pearson, one day a week. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to stick to that one day a week. If you want to talk after school on a Monday, that's fine. we're here. The whole point is we're teachers in this job with you guys. And that started from being the most improved school in England. Going back then, it was value added and whatever they measured it on. The school I'm currently at, we got the not the phone call from the Times. The Times found out after us this time. We found out just before Christmas we're officially the most improved school in England, #1, based off the results from last summer. So things obviously work. We won the maths team of the year. We've got JustMaths. Things work, and we like to share ideas, but we also love to hear different ideas that are happening around the country in terms of, particularly like we're going to talk today, how things are taught, why they're taught that way, do they ripple across other topics. I remember being so dubious, Mal, about this. Do you remember the whole mastery thing, the word coming out, and the Shanghai, I think schools sent off abroad to listen and come back and bring ideas. And I remember Mal went off and you actually watched one of the lessons, didn't you, from the team that came over from?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that we were against it. We love listening and thinking about ideas. But essentially what Mal came back from watching that lesson was the best bits from that lesson. We found that we did it anyway, but it wasn't so much that I think the big thing, the curveball was entered earlier, wasn't it? That trickier version of Pythag was just talked about a lot earlier than maybe we.
Yeah.
And it was always interesting listening to different ideas. And then the bar model came out. And I've always done a bar model, but I've never called it a bar model. I did it as like a big bracket. And it's almost finding the things that can work, whatever you call it, and seeing if it can ripple across, like I've said several times now, across different topics. So what we want here, please, is a chat. Yes, I've got a great idea. We do it this way. Drop us an email. We can talk in between now and March, and maybe think about the next one being even more of us talking about some ideas on a particular topic. And we'll do the big reveal at the end, what we think are the next ones that we could talk about. And we'll do that as a poll at the end of today. So please stick around, even if it's just to wait for that poll.
In terms of context as well, when we're talking about ratio and proportion, if you, just to bring this back to being a little bit boring about programs of study, ratio and proportion as part of the curriculum, having that proportionality and understanding how things relate to one another is massive. But strictly speaking, if you ever look at the GCSE programme of study or the GCSE spec, you've got ratio, proportion and rates of change. And I'm looking at it now. It includes things like scale factors. One fraction is an amount of another, which you might not think is ratio and proportion. Relating ratios to fractions, all percentages, including financial maths, density, pressure, making links to similarity. Then we've got what we would traditionally think about inverse and direct proportion. Interpreting the gradient as a point on a curve. We're not going to get into all of that, but so strictly speaking, all of that is classed as ratio and proportion. By somebody that put together the programme of study for the DFE, which then feeds into the GCSE spec. And so there's my little tempering of this, is that we're obviously not going to cover all of that. That would just be, it'd just be nuts. It just wouldn't happen. So we will attempt to cover aspects of what I suppose it's more traditional ratio and proportion.
Yeah. And I think it's the part and parcel of this conversation when GCSE, it's not the new GCSE anymore at all, but when the double ratio started to crop up in 2017, the whole language of bar modelling became quite popular, mastery. And essentially we're looking at, like Mal says, your traditional ratio, your proportion, which spans a whole load of things, your recipes, your exchange rates, your best buys.
Yeah.
So a lot of number work that relies upon, I suppose, the skill of, let's just use that blunt language, direct proportion. Whatever you do to one, you do to the other. That kind of process within maths that is huge across the GCSE, particularly the foundation paper with the number work, but then also when you start delving into a lot of the other topics or the areas of maths that crop up on the higher tier as well.
I suppose if I was to, well, we will go into a bit more detail, but really just give people a flavour. In terms of, we've structured our schemes of work in such a way that we cover very early on proportionality, direct proportion, inverse proportion, not necessarily formula and equations, but the idea, and we use whatever goes up this side, if this one increases, this increases. But we try to introduce almost the method of scaling up and scaling down that we can use across so many different topics. So they make those links. Oh, rather than teaching, oh, Best Buy, you do this. Oh, exchange rates, you do this. What we're talking about is that it's scaling up, scaling down. So trying to have that continuity of methods that they can hang their hat on. And so you're almost not teaching separate topics, you're just applying separate methods or the same method across multiple topics. And the idea that we're scaling up and scaling down. And we use that so often to the point where I think the other day when I was doing a foundation paper with a couple of students, the concept of whatever we do to this side, we do to that side, and that it is just direct proportion. We got to about question 8 or 9, and all we'd done was scaling up, scaling down, and some division. And it's almost just not limiting their methods, but giving them methods that they can deploy in lots of different topics.
Just there's come to be in the chat saying that their screen is full of the Pearson verification code request. That is on the slide. Do not worry, that is on the slide. I'm about to talk about it. That is a warning to make sure that when we go through all of the stuff that we're talking about today with Results Plus, getting into an Excel Online, please have the Authenticator app ready on your phone.
Yeah, so move off the slide.
It's not a request for you to do it now. Brilliant. I'll get off that slide now then.
Yeah.
So not confuse anyone else. Agreed. Teaching equivalent, scaling up, scaling down is key to unlocking many topics. A key skill, absolutely. It's a key skill. It's a fundamental, isn't it? It's a fundamental to get through this understanding of the numbers within that question. If anyone gets chance, and if you haven't seen it already, a very good question on the November papers this year, foundation paper. Oh no, it's a crossover question. Sorry, the Chocky bar question, and it literally is Chocky bar. Is it better value in London or Zurich? And it's on the crossover between, and it's on paper 2. And it's got the scaling up, scaling down in terms of your Best Buy. So you've got to get it as a like for like size. So I think it's 200 grams in one, 360 grams in the other. And then you've also got the exchange rate within it. And it's a brilliant question in terms of the methods that we're talking about today, but more importantly, the fact that these questions overlap. They're part and parcel of absolutely everything. And my students that I've got for year 11 now, when we were talking about it, not in terms of a mock, not in terms of an assessment, I was enjoying doing the question myself, so I pulled it up, showed it on the board, we talked about it. I don't use the language scale up, scale down. I use the language of, we draw a table. We put the pound sign above one, we put the dollar sign or the Swiss francs on the other. But then they've seen that within the question, the exchange rates, and that was what triggered that actually we've got to do the scaling up, scaling down the table to get the 200 grams and the 360 grams like for like first. And that process, not just exactly what someone has said in the chat there, and I'm not going to be able to get in on myself, and Mal will try over the course to dip in the chat, but it was just that it was well picked up there about, so I think it was you, Shirley, saying agreed, teaching equivalent, scaling up, scaling down, not just unlocking many topics, unlocking many elements of a question, and I think it's a very good question to go back and look at. Chalky Bar, November 24, crossover, paper 2. Right, very, very quickly on Results Plus, because I don't want to delve into this much, because this is what was on the previous session, if anyone came to that. But I do want to highlight a couple of elements, particularly the reminder to download the Authenticator app.
So there is a help desk if you have issues accessing it. So if you they're very helpful. We're not going to be able to resolve issues that you have accessing it, the Authenticator app. Amy's just put a link, so there's a troubleshooting guide. It's just, you have to, honestly, you have to invest the time, probably 20, 30 minutes if you do have issues. But I think it's here to stay, whether we like it or not.
Seems to be everything and anything now has an Authenticator app that you've got to get a code from your phone at some point. But if you Google Results Plus, you'll see that bottom page. If you go via your Pearson online account, you'll see it there, and you've got the left hand side there where it says Results Plus, and get to it that way. Speak to exam officer to make sure you've got, because it's all centralized now, in terms of your login for online is the same for your Results Plus. When you're in there, what we're going to be talking about more so today than we did on the previous session, we were looking at the highlight reports and the analysis and delving into papers and particular questions, whereas this time it's a bit more in regards to the skills map section of Results Plus. So once you're in there, go to the skills map, and as you can see there, we took that screenshot. We've got the open up there of ratio, proportion, and rates of change. Make sure you've got the papers there ready as well, either the most recent ones or whatever you want to go back and make reference to in terms of your Results Plus. But we're going to have a very quick look at some areas of ratio, proportion, not so much rates of change, but ratio, proportion elements that we think that the teaching flows across. There's a bit of a theme. There's also a conversation that I'm having myself here about the foundation versus higher. But we're going to look at that and then go a little bit more into, and Mal's going to take us through a few examples of that scaling up, scaling down that we keep mentioning, that seems to be that common thread of today. Once we've got into that area of ratio, proportion, rates of change, you can see here, you've got your elements of those parts, and then how your successes, shall I say, your successes or your areas for improvement or your comparison stands out there on the right hand side. So this is the foundation. You can see that there's a nice suite of green on there. Now that doesn't mean that we're blitzing everything on foundation. It's just that in comparison to that national average, there is something that's been quite well on the foundation with my school. And I do teach foundation group, the only foundation group. So yeah, I am going to take a little bit of credit here, of course, that there's a bit, I think there's a theme that flows through that enables us to get that kind of success. Now, some of them, they're 4% is neither here or there, but there's other ones that you can see best part of 40% that we're doing quite well on.
Would that be repetition, familiarity to questions that you do because they are, because I know that the starters you use where it's those retrieval of questions, and they are carefully chosen, that they follow your scheme of work, so you'll never put anything in front of kids they've not seen before. But also then, because you give me a question and I sit there and go, oh, I can't do, why haven't you done it, Mel? Oh, I can't do it. No, I know you've been taught it because you were in my lessons. So, and I know that that's the same for you, where there's nothing that they've not been taught. So it's almost taking the excuses away.
Yeah, I think you start off by giving me a couple of choices there, and the answer is all of the above.
Okay.
The starters, the retrieval, the anything for a child. And I say even a child, anything for a human being is repetition. Anything. Yeah. We can all get through the hardest exam if we've got the time to sit there, see examples from it before, and persevere and see it and see it and see it. The difference is with a group of teenagers and children that are in front of you, you have to build the relationships first. You've got to do all of that other stuff to enable the unlocking of the teaching to buy into it. But it is 100% repetition. And when you see something, you've got that frame of reference from it. So whether it's your starters that we've just mentioned that build up that repetition, whether it's your the fact that you've had that group for years and years and years, and you've built up that relationship and that repetition. But by the time it all comes together, whenever that happens to be for that group, whether you're moving on and you want it all to come together for the end of year 10 or for their real exam at the end of year 11, they've got that frame of reference, they've got that understanding, they've seen it so many times, and they go, right, I'll put my table, I'll split my page. How many times have we said, right, what we're doing here, the kids go, we split our page, and then essentially they're just getting organised. But they've got that language, they've got that repetition. And what the hard bit is for those students to see it in an unfamiliar context, to see it with more words than they normally see it with. But it's having the confidence to go with it because they've seen it working.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is somebody's just made a comment about it puts the worded question puts them off, and it does. But what we have to do is we have to normalise that there will be worded questions. We have to show them. So again, we've always structured when we take on a year 11 group, we start with something like two-way tables, frequency trees. Because it's easy. And it gives them some success, which gives them confidence. We're starting off on that confidence success spiral, but also they're two topics that get students organised. So for our intervention groups, it shows them how to organise data, either as a two-way table or a frequency tree. Very quickly they realise a two-way table or a table of some format is more efficient. And that's the part of getting the stuff out of the text into the working area. And Seager's just made me chuckle. He said, how many things, it's about splitting the page. So very often when over the years, I've been in the class so often with him where it's, right, how many people have we got? Let's split the page into 3. How many shops are we comparing? 2. Let's split the page into 2. So it is about normalising the process and the process it. So when they go, oh, I want to sit and think, no, there is a process. Take the information. We've got to reduce that cognitive load. So they're not going from the working area to the text. And they almost need to just get used to summarising. And I don't mean summarising with lots of words. I mean, Bob earns £500. So I've got Bob 500 quid as my top of my working space. So the whole worded questions, it is tough, but the more they do it, the easier it gets, because Seager's used that phrase, they have that frame of reference on which to hang the new work that they're doing.
I think sometimes the scare factor of going in at that level, so what Mal just said I think is really vital, that for the confidence to go early, and this is what came out of mastery. The curveballs get thrown in a lot earlier in these countries that use this mastery model, and I don't believe that there is a mastery model. I think it is very much the best of everything and throwing things in early with these wordy questions earlier than we would have done. It's almost like normalising tough questions early, looking for the maths, going for it, and the wordy questions like you just mentioned there. So two-way tables by default, they're more wordy. So starting with them makes the tougher, wordier questions later accessible, because you're willing to read them, because you're opening your mind, because you've had it, or your mind's been opened by doing the easier ones with more story and more words from the start of your year 11, year 10, whenever.
So is this, looking at the screen, is this the same data as for higher tier?
Yeah, so this is exactly the same for higher 2024. For the same, you can see there, same areas of maths.
Wow.
And there's something there. When you start digging in a little bit more, it's not as worrying as it first there. But nonetheless, it's a starting point to have a look at. Right, I want to delve into within my school. ratio and proportion. First of all, let's look at the skills map. Let's look at higher versus foundation. The same student, the same year group, having a slightly different journey. So this opened up my conversation, like we was talking just before to hear. Why are they read on higher? Is it necessary that they're worse in these topics on higher than they are on foundation? No, I don't think it is. Are they better taught on foundation? No, I don't think they are. I think that the foundation naturally opens up more for the conversations we're having today anyway, that scaling up, scaling down more regularly within your lessons because of the heavy number content. And when you come to year 11, and I was with a support, I say support, it's a conversation with a school earlier today, and we were talking about their mock results and what was coming out and what they're doing next. They've just finished histograms on their schema work and they're moving into cumulative frequency. A lot of year 11 takes you down that route of these topics on higher that takes you away from that number work, the processes, the scaling up, scaling down naturally. Does it fall out of their heads a little bit? Are they less used to using it? Do we need to bring it in more back in year 7, 8 and 9 as a process? And again, our conversation earlier was if Key Stage 3 is absolutely nailed with absolutely everything you want them to be brilliant at, I don't mean that they remember it. It does make years 10 and 11 a piece of cake when you get there. And
it is quite interesting because I think the absolute values, it's not the issue. The absolute scores on those questions, it's not the issue. It's compared to the national average. Again, I don't mean an issue. It's just in terms of it's where you are in your school journey. It's part of having a metric to be able to come back and go, did we get better at using compound measures in 5 years' time? Because you'd hope you would. For your higher tier students, it will be a case of that they're less there's less AO1, i.e. using and applying. So it will be and it's more what you focus on in year 11 on a higher tier. Like you say, it is those other topics that are higher only. They're not necessarily your crossover topics, because that's what they were taught lower down the school.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So a couple of questions that I picked out that just went back and had a look that matched up to, I'm trying my hardest to look at ratio. Are we successful with it? Are we not? Are we smashing the national average? Are we not? So 11.5% over the national average. We're not talking a huge amounts there, but we're still in the green. We're still positive. 1.72 out of 2 compared to the national average of 1.49 out of 2 on a foundation question, paper 1, question 10. Pretty straightforward, and I would like to think there that most students are picking up that 1 mark out of the 2, because I'm assuming it's going to be for writing it as a ratio anyway, for knowing you know what it means as a ratio. So 24 to 36, and then the simplifying process is what is catching people out, whether they fully simplify it or not. So first and foremost is, how are we doing on the very, very basics with ratio? What are they doing in scenarios like that, these students, foundation or higher? I know it's a foundation question, but how would a higher do it? Can we completely hand on heart know what a ratio looks like? 1, 2, are they okay with the simplifying process, particularly when you cannot always just half, 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 half. And it gets to that point where you have to think, divide by 3. I know you don't like half now. Divide by 3.
No, I don't. It's divided by 2 and dividing by 3.
And then when you get to that point where you can't divide by 2, do they have that armory to go that step further?
But I think that's,
yeah,
I think that's also about the questions you use in your teaching, in that it's very simple. And this is where the for me, pedagogy lies, is the questions that you use as your worked examples, the question you use for the kids to do. Very often you will find a simplifier ratio where there's only 1 step. So it might be 3 and 6. Then you think, I'm gonna bamboozle the kids, I'm gonna ramp up the level, and you might find it where it's 2 steps to simplify it. So it could be I'm just trying to, I'm not very good at stuff on my head, so I always have my questions planned. 12 to 8 goes to 6 to 4. But even that, there's 3 steps. And very often I find that when I've taught other groups is that they stop because they've only ever been exposed. Their frame of reference of questions is where there's only 1 or 2 steps to get to their final answer. A bit like Seager's just said, and they may not think, they've probably never seen a one where it's 14 and 21, where it's a 7. The common factor is 7. So
And
it's
you said in the chat, Mal, that
yes,
set simplifying 78
yes,
to 52, and
exactly that.
I bet it's quite a lot of them, not just a few, stopped at 39 to 26.
But that's about exposing them to lots of different variety of questions and not just the same old stuff. It's about, are they getting enough variation into to be able to apply, because it's the same skill. So it's exactly that. I'd like to think that you, having seen you teach, you probably do, and I've probably seen you do ones where it's involved in coming up with outrageous number of steps to get to the final one.
Yeah, you've got prime numbers thrown in there and all of that stuff where they're not very nice. So I think there, that 39 really throws people straight away. I know it's not a prime number, but it's that scenario. It looks prime. It looks horrible. Forcing them to see more of those again earlier than what you probably do normally. Throw it in after the first one they've done, and let them and then the conversation.
So I think the phrase I use is, I would say that we overteach. So we teach them more difficult processes and variation of questions than they'll ever be exposed to in an exam, so that when it comes to the exam, they go, oh, that was easy compared to what you've been showing us.
This one, spending
20%.
I don't think we spend a lot of time on it. We do these kind of questions as part and parcel of our scheme of work anyway, because when I'm talking about year 11 here, and delving in and really going for that crossover, and we have a direct proportion for recipes, direct proportion for best buy, direct proportion for exchange rates, and they all link together, and you see that skill because we teach them very, very closely together. And it becomes, no matter what that scenario is, they've got that, okay, I need to be getting that scaling up, scaling down the table, whatever we call it. So this one here is a dream of a question for my groups, or my group in year 11 doing an exam. And okay, 20%, but 2.4 out of 3 compared to the national average of 1.83. What I should have done here is gone back into Results Plus and Scripts Viewer, and got a couple of the kids' images. But I know you've got something similar when you get to your minute anyway, Mal. But that there is your perfect scenario. And
so would you?
Sorry,
so lots of lots of people will teach. Oh, for best buy, we teach the unitary method. So what you're teaching students is that for best value, you always get 1. Or for exchange rates, well, if you're going abroad, your time. So come up with these different rules for different topics, rather than teaching, well, it's all the same. It is all direct proportion. The whole idea that you're going to try to get them the same quantity. And for me, and I don't know how you would have taught that one student, and it would have been interesting to see whether your students would have all gone for 24, or would they worked out the price for 4?
Yeah, open this one to my current year 11 and shown them, and you've got the ones there, and I can't. This was non-calculator, so I've almost got a bit of the process going that when you've got that calculator in front of you, divide is a little bit better because you've got the calculator there. So getting it down to 1 when you've got a calculator. So that generally, it's a bit, I'm not saying it happens every time, it's a bit of a rule of thumb that when we've got the calculator, you've got a bit more of a comfort blanket with dividing down and getting it down. So scaling down, get it down to 1. without the calculator, always look to be going and building upwards, because it's easier with building blocks to keep adding on without a calculator. And then we did have one in the group, and it's quite a relatively small group, that actually got to 12 by messing around with the 8, adding half back on. But in the main, yeah, 24. Literally built up to 24. That was the majority. Funnily enough, on these numbers here, they all did divide nicely back down by dividing by and getting it down to 1 anyway. So we did have a couple that went with that method, but it's about that armory again. It's not about always going up, always going down. This is about scaling up, scaling down is the norm. Feel free, go up, go down. I don't care.
Yeah.
As long as we've got this process going that actually it's comfortable for me to build up. I like building up. I have that comfort blanket with a calculator to go down sometimes. And Kian, he loves his division in his head. He automatically goes for that anyway, regardless of how nasty the numbers come out. He just loves his division. So again, it's all about that process being so fluent that it's natural for him to go, right, I'm going to get a table. I've got 3 columns on this one, split the page, 3 columns, pack 4, pack 8, pack 12. What am I going to do? Do I want to go up? Do I want to go down? I'm going to mess with the 8 to get that to be 12. Oh, 4 goes up to 12 quite nicely. And it's, again, constantly, whatever we do to that number of batteries, we do to the amount. We divide by 2, we divide by 2. We times by 3, we times by 3.
Yeah, the other thing that we do in terms of that supports ratio and proportion, I'm just looking at my list on the board, is that just before ratio proportion, specifically with year 11, we will have taught product of primes, highest common factor, lowest common multiple, multiples in context, to deal with some of that prior knowledge stuff like, oh, what's the lowest common multiple of 4, 8, and 12? So that also helps us. Sequencing.
Throwing in, it's amazing how all of the stuff like your primes, your factors, your square numbers, all of that kind of stuff could end up being such reliance in questions further down the line.
Yeah.
I don't mean your 1 markers at the start of the exam with everything. Building those type of, and what I've started to do as well, and at this time of year, and Mal's seen me do it all the time, is I love doing the 1 to 10 questions with my year 10s. When it comes to year 11s, they've got their bread and butter starters, which is their retrieval task. But then I say, right, turn over 5 questions. And we do, write down the first 5 prime numbers. What's a multiple? What's the lowest common factor, highest common factor, lowest common multiple? All those kind of things. To recap that from this point onwards in year 11. I want to do a bit of a dig and a comparison between some higher and foundation questions as well, which is a little bit tougher because we start to go into the crossover questions now. And myself and Mel talked about this question just before coming on again. The double ratio, that overlapping ratio, the information where you've got 2 ratios within a question, that's, I'm sure it's not, but it seems to be new from the 2017 exam when it landed, the 9 to 1. It's green on the foundation, red on the higher. We're still doing better on average with our centre on higher, so 2.58 out of 5 compared to 1.64 out of 5. But compared to the national average, the higher tier students nationally are doing better on that than we are on higher, but our foundation tier students are doing better nationally, even though they're not doing as well as the higher tier students within our centre. So as much as I've got a green versus a red, you've got to go a bit more into the detail and look at it in comparison to maybe your centre, the diet they've had, the years they've missed out on COVID, the systems in place, the teachers they've got, all of that kind of stuff. But it's just interesting when you start looking at the crossover on how and what's the diet they get in your centre across teaching. And I found that quite interesting to look at, that, okay, what is it with foundation that does better, but then also what our higher tier students are still doing better? Is that because you said it, Mal, just before coming on, didn't you, about there's almost the expectation your higher tier students have a bit more natural understanding of this rather than it being explicitly taught.
Yeah, and I think it's also that it's part of that journey that would have probably, bear in mind you've only been there 18 months, that probably for your true higher tier students would be something that you would have expected them to be able to nail by the end of year 9, maybe. And it is part of your journey that will come earlier on. For me, there's a couple of things that jumps out about that, is that lesson 1 for me with my, and again, context, I only teach foundation, I generally only teach foundation, I teach crossover groups where I've got a mixture in both. But my lesson 1 with year 11 is making sure they understand the importance of being able to find fraction of an amount. If they can't find that 3/8 of 400, it's almost a barrier to them being able to access the rest of the question. And there's so many times that ratio and proportion questions throughout both tiers of entry have this barrier of something that is something fundamental, like dividing a number, that because they're not confident with division, but fraction of an amount opens so many questions up that stops, especially our foundation kids, accessing it. So make them really, really good of fractions of an amount. And we both do that within our first lesson of, and then every lesson then for probably about 4 weeks to the point, whether you like it or not, divide by the bottom times by the top. Because they've got to be able to do, and then you show them that actually the rest of this question, so we call them overlapping ratios, and we make a link with what's the most important part of a Venn diagram. Well, it's the overlap. You try to fill that bit. So totally separate topic, but using similar language. Okay, so we've got to get the overlap the same. And then as soon as they can start seeing, oh, I can get this as one big long ratio, small to medium to large, and then I focus on getting the overlap the same. So again, they're scaling those ratios up. The rest of the question, and I use the analogy that if I want to get to Birmingham from where I am now, the first thing I have to do is get in my car. So the first thing I've got to be able to do is start that fraction of an amount. The final bit of the journey, the percentage of the amount, that might not become clear till I'm in Birmingham city centre. And that's what wordy maths questions are like. Sometimes the route becomes clearer once you've started it. So that fraction of an amount there jumps out at me about, is it that your foundation kids would have had that instilled in them, whereas your higher tier kids they'll work it out, but it may not be as, they haven't got yet that automaticity, if that's a word.
Just delving into a couple of the higher questions, not so much the topics, the area that we're talking today, but still coming underneath that ratio, proportion, rates of change, areas of, and this doesn't faze me too much, because as a journey that we're going on, we've got to that improvement. Now we're fine tuning areas like this, that, and also I fully believe you've got to have the students and the ethos within the school and the department to be able to teach this successfully anyway. And I think our school is on that journey. We're now getting the buy-in. They've seen success within the school. We are getting the accolades. Hold on, we're doing things right. I'm going to buy into what these teachers are telling me. And we've got a better ethos going through. So these kind of delving into the top end of this topic, inverse proportion, direct proportion, is not phasing me so much, looking at the data, because of where we're at. And then going into, okay, out of context, or I suppose in context, another example of what we're talking about here, the scaling up, scaling down. As soon as you've got a scale involved, your scale is a scaling up, scaling down. The word's there for you to indicate it's that process. Get it in a table, 1 centimetre on one side, 4 kilometres on the other. The amount of times, and we're all have heard this at times, or you know for a fact from teaching and marking exam papers internally, metric conversions. Okay, not so much in this example here, but your early questions convert 5 centimetres into millimetres, convert 3.1 metres into centimetres. What I'm drilling into the students, particularly now we're recapping a lot of these 1 markers in class, and please go and have a look at the 1 marker starters on the Maths Emporium. They are brilliant. They've got all the 1 mark questions that have cropped up since 2017, and you can use those as starters. Is draw a table. What's the fact you know? That's not the problem. The fact they generally remember there's 100 centimetres in a metre. They've been drilled in, they've heard it enough times, but how you relate that fact to the question is a different scenario. If they put it in the table and they write down what they do know, under metres, so m on one side, centimetres on the other, 1 metre, set 100, then they write the number in the question, 3.6, you spot the times across, you times by the same amount because you're going in the same direction. When you build that process, it does help the questions. And every year, November and summer, there's a hit list of 5 topics that's always the worst answered. Fractions, percentages, decimals, metric conversions. Metric conversions every single time is in there. And if you can build that in as part and parcel of what we're talking about today, you guys and all of us here will be better than the national picture out there that it's always one of the worst answer questions. So I wanted to pick that out more so that it's the same process again within so many different scenarios. Here we go again, recipes, another scenario that we're doing well on. Okay, we're not beating the national average as much as I'd like to there, but we're generally doing quite well. I think the question itself was a nice one, 20 to 10. Half it down, 10, add it on, job done. So I think it did help that the numbers were quite nice on that one. I'm just going to skip over a few of these areas because I know Mal's got some pictures of actual questions with the scenarios going on. I just want to finish off my little bit here with questions I asked myself when I looked at that data. Are higher underperforming compared to foundation? Not so much, but I still want to go and have a look at that area when it crops up on our schema work in higher versus foundation groups. It's made me enough want to go and have a look at it. Are similar approaches possible across tiers, across when it becomes a tougher example in higher? I think so. We've already said that this process is accessible from a 1 marker question up to a 5 marker question. So why is it not between higher and foundation? Do we share enough good practice in-house? Do we talk about common misconceptions enough? I've got a column in my scheme of work that we're in an ideal world, we're adding to it when we come across it. Do we build in enough time as a department to talk about them and write them in? I know when myself and Mal worked together, we did. I don't think we do as much now. I've moved away from someone who thinks on the same path as I do. And I think that, I don't know if that's the same for you, Mal, that it's not as much on your conversation as when we used to sit there, share the same classroom and go, why are they messing up that? I think
Yeah.
we talked maths all the time.
Yeah.
But it's something that we've got in our scheme of work, and we do try and delve into it as much as we can. And then do the students see the maths through the questions when, like I said, those wordy questions are particularly at higher.
So I'm just going to add a couple of things about in terms of pedagogy, because it's really difficult with these things to know who you're pitching to, because there'll be heads of departments there, there'll be teachers, ECTs, be teachers that have been teaching longer than we have. But what we found works for us is having the concepts of this proportionality as early as possible. Get students having some kind of numerosity to know, oh, does that get bigger? Even to the point of, and so I'll use an analogy about when inverse proportion was brought down to foundation, me and Seager said we're never going to be able to teach that topic to our kind of kids. But you find a way, because you start talking about, so if I have less taps, is it going to take more time to fill my bath? Oh, this one gets bigger, this one gets smaller. And we do it with a show of hands, and it looks like you're Marcel, and you're doing one hand's up, one hand's down. But as early as possible, but don't just say it's only it's giving them and part of their numeracy toolkit to be able to scale things up and scale things down. But for us, it's always worked as 2 teachers. We were lucky enough to have other teachers in our super group that we partnered with when we worked together. So we were able to share that expertise with other teachers and see it disseminate throughout the department, and making sure that we're all doing the same thing. And just because you do like, and you will call it the unitary methods or whatever methods you use for that topic, giving them I'm not saying talk about limited methods, but giving them methods and tools that work across a range of topics, across a department. And then also look at the marking, make sure you're attending, knowing where marks are allocated. This for me was massive. The money that you get paid, if you get the opportunity and want to, and have the time, definitely do apply to be a marker for the exams, because you pick up so much. Things like the question that's on the screen, knowing where those marks come from. Obviously, there's 1 mark being allocated for, if you flick through those there, you'll see that there's 1 mark allocated, they've done it as a ratio. The second mark comes from them in its simplest form. Knowing that and telling students. But I know it's really common for people to do, you'll see the arrows there. It's a format of a ratio table, but what is important is that they write it as a ratio. It isn't just a table. If it's a ratio and it's 24 to 36, it's 24:36. If it's 24 centimetres equals, or whatever, or it's a currency conversion, it is 80 or £1 equals 0.8 euros. We make sure we write down what it is, and Seager already alluded to that, like 100 centimetres is 1 metre. Make sure those, but that also applies to having that ratio colon in there, because without that, they don't get awarded the marks. And this is the prime example. If you look at this one, so they've written 24 to 36, but they haven't written it as a ratio. They've just written the numbers 24 to 36. And so obviously the final mark is wrong as well. But just worth noting, it's not just a matter of throwing stuff down. We've got to teach students to be slower, more deliberate, and just not see it as getting to the final answer. So in terms of ratio explicitly, the other one I want to talk about is percentages, depending on how you teach it. I used to love teaching this is a paper 2, a calculator paper. And when we talk about the build-up method, in order to get marks for the build-up methods, each percentage value needs to be correct. And in this case, it is. But if they make a mistake at any point in the build-up method, whereas, to be honest, for a foundation paper 2, we should be talking about students being able to use decimal multipliers and not still be using the build-up method. And they're lucky in this case, they got every step of that right. But over the years, I've seen messes where they're just not able to allocate the marks for those, for the build-up method, especially for paper 2. So in terms of strategy specific for year 11, we've got to make it explicit what we use for non-calculator and what we use for calculator. Ideally, I'd love it that we could get them all multiplying decimals, but we know that one of the first decimal questions I use in my first lesson with every year 11, it's almost testing their a little bit of a test, 0.2 times 0.3, and you know the answer we're going to get. But that's always in my first lesson with year 11, just to show them, and I use it as an opportunity to build up that we need to be getting these right, because it's one of the basic skills they need for everything else. But again, context, I teach year 11 intervention groups.
Right, a little bit of support from Pearson. The Emporium is riddled with support, with ideas, with examples, with everything. So if you ever want, just like I said at the start, we're credible specialists. We use this stuff in here. We've created some of the stuff in here. So please get in touch with us, even if you just want a bit of a delve into some of the things that are in there. So unmatched support. We are available to keep in touch. We want this one to be different to everything we've done before, that we are working together on this to create either a bit of a bank of ideas. And we started off with the flavour that myself and Mal heavily use, which is that scaling up, scaling down, that table that can work through, particularly like we've said before, with that number direct proportion type of question. So I hope it's set up this session today has set up something even more different, open for the next one in March. So thank you very much for listening to us today, or whenever you've watched it back. And here's looking forward to when we jump all on in March.